Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malkuto Leolam Vayed. Yeshua HaMashiach Hu Adonai. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our Elohim, Yahweh is one. Blessed be his glorious name, whose kingdom is forever and ever. The Messiah Yeshua, he is our master. Amen. All right, what?
I like the other way better.
Do you? Okay, folks, we are going to be in the book of Zechariah. We are going into Zechariah, the first of his prophetic visions about horses, horns, and craftsmen. Can you see my screen? Excellent, excellent. Horses, horns, and craftsmen. Now, before we fully get to rocking on this thing, I wanted to just, as I am wont to do, give a brief overview. A review. We talked about the briefest of overviews of prophecy in general, and how in the first word of the Lord that came to Zechariah, he was admonishing the exiles to take warning from their ancestors. And to turn to Yah with all of their hearts, not be half-hearted. And there was a warning also to us that we should seek to turn to Yah with all of our hearts and not be half-hearted. As a preview of what we'll cover today, we'll cover the first of the prophetic night visions of Zechariah. It's like that. That first word of the Lord that came to Zechariah was, it's like I said, it was just a bit of a warning, and now he's about to start revealing. So that first message was directly aimed at the exiles with some correction that they might have needed. We reviewed some of the issues that they were dealing with from the books of Nehemiah and Ezra, and also Haggai, excuse me. And so this prophetic vision, it starts to unfold regarding, frankly, the whole of redemptive history from the time of Zechariah until our current day. It does cover a lot of stuff. The 8 visions that he sees that encompass all of Zechariah chapters 1 through, I believe it's 6. So we'll deal with the first of the prophetic visions today, which is the horses patrolling the earth. These red and dappled or sorrel and white horses, and among the myrtle trees and stuff like that. If we get to it, we perhaps will cover the horns that have scattered Judah, and I kind of have my doubts about this, but we might get to the craftsmen who terrify the horns, whatever that means. So I want to start with reading Zechariah chapter 1, verses 7 through 21, which encompass all 3 of these little visions here. So, it's story time with Uncle Alan. If you can see this, I will now start the text. Okay, here we are in Zechariah chapter 1, starting at verse 7. Let me get a drink. It says, on the 24th day, oops, I gotta let somebody in. Okay. On the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month Shivat, in the 2nd year of Darius, the word of Yah came to Zechariah the prophet, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, as follows. I saw at night, and behold, a man was riding on a red horse, and he was standing among the myrtle trees, which were in the ravine. with red, sorrel, and white horses behind him. Then I said, Sir, what are these? And the angel who was speaking with me said to me, I will show you what these are. And the man who was standing among the myrtle trees answered and said, These are those whom Yah has sent to patrol the earth. So they answered the angel of Yah who was standing among the myrtle trees and said, We have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth is peaceful and quiet. Then the angel of Yah answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long will you have no compassion for Jerusalem and the cities of Judah with which you have been indignant these 70 years? And Yah answered the angel who was speaking with me with gracious words, comforting words. So the angel who was speaking with me said to me, Proclaim, saying, Thus says Yah of hosts, I am exceedingly jealous for Jerusalem and Zion, but I am very angry with the nations who are at ease. For while I was only a little angry, they furthered the disaster. Therefore, thus says Yehovah, I will return to Jerusalem with compassion. My house will be built in it, declares Yah of hosts, and a measuring line will be stretched over Jerusalem. Again proclaims, saying, Thus says Yehovah of hosts, my cities will again overflow with prosperity, and Yah will again comfort Zion, and again choose Jerusalem. Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there were 4 horns. So I said to the angel who was speaking with me, What are these? And he answered me, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. Then Yah showed me 4 craftsmen. And I said, What are these coming to do? And he said, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that no man lifts up his head. But these craftsmen have come to terrify them, to throw down the horns of the nations who have lifted up their horns against the land of Judah in order to scatter it. Woo, boy. There you go. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to relinquish the floor to Ella, and she's going to tell us what this means. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. Thank you for volunteering, though, Ella. Now, I have a lot of questions. I'm sure you do too. I think I mentioned to you before, I'm sorry, I'm making excuses. I'm standing next to the excuse cone, so I get to do this for just a second. This is one of the hardest books of prophecy, one of the most enigmatic by all Bible scholars. There you go. My excuse cone has been passed on. I'm no longer making excuses. Now, this night vision was not a dream. He did not hear audible voices. He was seeing visions in the night. And he apparently saw 8 to 10, depending upon how you break it down. He saw 8 of these visions in one night. I don't know if you were aware of that. That was a very eventful night. All 8 of his visions occurred in one night. That would be the night of approximately January or February 24th. He sees 8 to 10 different visions. Now, like I said, it could be 8 to 10. This vision that we just saw right here, you could technically say this is 3 visions, because he sees one with the man and the horses and the myrtle trees. He sees another that is talking about these horns, and then a third that is talking about the craftsmen who come. But I think that the horns and the craftsmen could probably be kind of lumped together because they seem to be connected. Now, this is 3 months after the word of Yah first came to him with the warning to not behave like our ancestors. And so, in this first scene, I want to just briefly break down the elements that we're seeing here, because there is some confusion. There is a man riding on a red horse. Not only is this man riding on a red horse, he is also standing among the myrtle trees. So I don't know if this means he saw a man riding a horse and then this same man was among the myrtle trees. That's a little bit confusing to me. There are red and dappled or spotted and white horses behind him. Presumably these other horses also have riders because they speak in a moment, and I presume that the horses are not speaking, but they probably have riders, although it is not unprecedented that animals speak in the Bible. And there's also an angelic messenger who is helping to interpret the vision. Now, before we get to breaking down these elements and talking about these things, I want to point out just a couple of things. Number one, I think that when we are seeing prophetic visions and utterances that are given, whether through the word of the Lord or through an angel or messenger, whatever, to a prophet, whether it's Zechariah or is Isaiah or John, we kind of have to, for each instance, determine who is the message for. Okay, so the first word of Yah that came to Zechariah was very clearly and distinctly directed toward the exiles who were living in the land of Judah at that time. That was a message for them. Watch yourselves, because you don't want to behave like your ancestors. Now, though, we are getting into prophetic visions that have something to do with seemingly the future, I presume, but there's also some elements of what is current. So when we're looking at prophecy overall, I think we one of the first things we need to look at is, who is this message most likely for? Clearly, people have been reading prophecy for thousands of years, but like the book of 1 Peter says, that they, although they diligently searched the scriptures seeking to know the time and such, it was revealed to them that they were not serving themselves, these prophets who received these messages, but that it was for a later time. And so what did they do with that information? I guess they just tucked it away and said, I presume that that's not for me at this time. It's fascinating, and I'm going to dig through it and try to understand it, but I understand that it is not for me. Now, we are in a little bit of a different position, being, 2,500 years later, from after the time that this guy wrote this stuff down, we would kind of, I think many of us or most of us would say, this is particularly going to be relevant to us living as we are at the end of the age. So would anyone care to comment on that? Does that seem right to you? Just that, as well as the idea that we do need to be careful about how we try to apply, what it applies to. Jerry, you want to say something?
I think this could be the horseman of the book of Revelation. I mean, because the white one, the red one, the dark one, the black one.
Yeah.
They're all right together.
Yeah, that's a good insight, Jerry. And I think, I initially had that thought. Although there is another vision of Zechariah in chapter 6, which has slightly different colored horses. And those horses and riders are going out to do something. And those colors of those horses do exactly match the horses and riders of the book of Revelation with the opening of the first 3 seals. Angela?
Well, I have a question. Where is the black horse here?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is that these horses are a little bit different. They're not going, they've come back from a mission and the colors don't exactly match. So some people have questioned, are these the same horses that we see in chapter 6? Are these the same horses that we see in Revelation? I don't think that they are. Maybe some of them are, but we have the colors don't exactly match. So it's not easy for them to line up. But, here's the second point that I would make regarding these prophetic utterances. You notice that Zechariah is perplexed. And why wouldn't he be? He has no idea what he's seeing. In fact, we often see this in Scripture with a prophet who receives a word from Yah, and he has no idea what he's seeing. And then there's a lot of times a messenger, an angelic messenger, who is there to provide the interpretation of what he's seeing, to give some meaning to what the prophet is seeing. However, in spite of the angelic messenger, there is often continued perplexity that doesn't help. It's like I suppose it's like talking to a really advanced mathematician, and I'm saying he tells me something about chaos theory, and I say that doesn't make any sense at all. And he's like, well, let me explain it to you. You got to look at it like this, and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't help. It's outside of the scope of what my brain can take in. And I would share with you another little passage here that I think will be instructive about this. Take a look at this passage from Daniel 8 and 15. In Daniel 8 and 15 it says, and it came about when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, he's discussing a vision that he had seen, that I sought to understand it. And behold, standing before me was one who looked like a man. And I heard the voice of a man between the banks of the Ulai Canal, and he called out and said, Gabriel, give this man an understanding of the vision. So he came near to where I was standing, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end. Now while he was talking with me, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and made me stand upright, and he said, Behold, I am going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. And then I'm skipping down to Daniel 8:27, where it says, Then I, Daniel, after having had this explanation, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I got up again and carried on the king's business. But I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it, which I thought was odd, since the angel explicitly came to help him and to explain it. And he did, but it didn't help. He was still perplexed at the end of the explanation. And I think, just because we have an angel saying in this passage from Zechariah, oh, these are these riders who have gone to patrol the whole earth, and the earth is quiet and sitting still. What does that mean? How do we interpret that? So the explanation seems to me to be not especially helpful. But it can be. It gives you hints and it gives you clues. And you can, I think, with some good study and some word studies and comparing messages to other passages which are really similar, you can gain some insight and some wisdom. But you have to be very careful because it's very enigmatic. And so, would anyone comment on that aspect of it, of just the mysterious nature of this and how difficult it really is? Anyone care to comment on that at all? No? Okay. Maybe it doesn't require comment. Tracy, yeah, go ahead, Tracy, and then Jacqueline.
My comment is something I kind of was looking at with the red horse. Is that something I can share right now?
Oh, sure.
So what stood out to me in verse 10, it says who these people are, this guy in the red horse and these other individuals that are on horses. It says, these are those who Yahweh has sent to walk to and fro through the earth. And then it goes on to say that we have walked to and fro through the earth, and behold, all the earth sits still and is at peace. Mm-hmm. And so that to and fro sticks out to me because that's elsewhere in Scripture. It reminded me of 2 Chronicles 16:9 when Yahweh is telling King Asa, I believe he's of Israel, king of Israel. He says, "For the eyes of Yahovah run to and fro in all the earth, to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is perfect toward him. You have done foolishly in this, therefore from now on you shall have wars," which is the opposite of peace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at the red horse in Revelation chapter 6, that is what the red horse does. He comes out to take peace from the earth.
Yeah.
So I think there might be a connection there to the red horse, seeing that there's this quote-unquote peace, but it all depends on whether or not your heart is made perfect toward Yahovah, whether you will have peace or not. So it is very mysterious, but I do see a connection there.
Yeah. No, that's excellent insight. Jacqueline?
Just to quickly add on to what Tracy said, then I have a different thought too. Another person who goes to and fro throughout the earth is the accuser who comes before God in the beginning of Job.
That's right.
One that I remember going throughout the earth.
Yeah.
And I think that there's other spirits that God has go to and fro throughout the earth that are like watchers or things like that.
Yep, absolutely.
So, it's a thing. But the other thing I was going to say about understanding prophecy and having explanation given to you and yet still not understanding. One thing that I've been realizing the last couple of years now is that when God gives prophecy, it has a double purpose. So it's giving out wisdom that is to be for our understanding and edification, but it's also given out to be a mystery to mine. And I think part of that is because he does not want to let the spiritual realm understand what is happening, because he's creating things that are laying a trap for the enemy for what is to come. But he still needs to inform his people of it so that we have understanding, so we know how to follow through with it. And I'm reminded of the verse often when I think about prophecy, about how it says the angels long to see what we have understanding of. And so I feel like even though these guys have been given this prophecy and given an explanation, it still requires mining, and it still requires further revelation but he can't give it outright, because otherwise it won't work out the way he wants it to. And so there's this learning and this level of understanding. And so
Can I say that thing about
yeah, that's a great insight. Angela, go ahead.
Alan and I were talking about that, Jacqueline, and this whole idea of he gives the one piece, which is the vision, and then he gives the second piece, which is this explanation that doesn't help at all. And I asked Alan that maybe there's piece number 3 that will make it all come together, and that third piece is timing, that you have to be at a certain time for all of that to come together and to make sense.
I would agree with that 100%, that I think that, think about, all of these people, because if you're reading prophecies that are going to be fulfilled at the end of the age, so to speak, well, you might say, well, prophecy is useless then unless you happen to be living at the time that particular prophecy is being fulfilled. But I doubt very much that that's true. These prophecies in a lot of cases, and I think in a really big way, are supposed to be encouraging. And I think that this is precisely why these prophecies are being given to this group of people at this time, who are going through great difficulty and tribulation. They have just gotten a big spanking from their dad. Angela talked about that on our first study of this book, where, your father comes in afterwards and says, I still love you. It's going to work out. I needed to correct you. So that's important. And we have to be able to glean encouragement from that. But I also, I just like you, Jacqueline, have considered a lot of times regarding scripture and especially prophetic scripture, trying to understand it and interpret it. And I look at, I think this is a really good thing to do, and it requires more advanced study, and I encourage you to do it. Look at when people in the Bible interpret prophecy. Do you know of times in the Bible when people in the Bible are literally interpreting prophecy themselves? I mean, think about Daniel. He says, I discerned by reading the prophet Jeremiah that the exile was going to last 70 years. And then you go and you're like, oh, wow, where's that? And you look up in Jeremiah, and it's just as plain as the nose on your face. There's nothing hidden about it. There's no mystery there. It just literally comes right out and says, 70 years have been decreed. And Daniel read that and he's like, I discerned. I didn't need to go crazy with word studies and examining the Hebrew. It just said it right there. And I realized, oh yeah, okay. So, there wasn't a whole lot of mystery there. But then let's say that you jump in advance to the New Testament, and you've got lots of the disciples and the writers of the New Testament interpreting passages of Scripture. Now that's different. It is more complex. It is more complicated, and it's like the Spirit of Yah is coming upon them and saying to them, that passage you were familiar with, and I think that this is key, you can't have prophecy revealed to you if you don't know it. If you don't have the words, if you hear something or see something and you think to yourself, oh wait, this reminds me of that thing I read. This goes right back to our Bible study, session that we did a couple of months ago. If you don't have those seeds planted in your mind, when prophecy begins to be unfolded and the Spirit is moving and is revealing these things and you don't have those seeds germinating in your mind, they'll go right over your head and you'll have no idea. But these New Testament authors continuously are saying, this is what was spoken of by the prophet when he said this weird, enigmatic, mysterious thing. Yeshua did this or said this or had this happen to him. That was a prophetic fulfillment of what was said by King David or Zechariah or Zephaniah or Jeremiah, whoever. So they are experiencing firsthand these events that are unfolding, which are synchronizing with the seeds that are planted in their minds, and the Spirit is saying, this is that. This is that. And that's an amazing thing. But notice in all of those cases, it is that when it is happening at the time, it's happening at the time of the revelation. You get Daniel it's coming up towards the end of the period of exile, or he's in the middle of it, and he says, I determined that this is how long it's going to take. He's right in the middle of it. Yeshua had just, within a period of maybe a couple of months, maybe a couple of years, had just done and said these things or had these things happen to him, and the disciples are like, and Yeshua said that the Holy Spirit would do that. He would bring to your mind all the things that he said, and remind them of those things, but also, I think, reveal those truths that were buried in their minds from studying the Scriptures. But all these things are happening contemporaneously with the events on the ground. It's like the prophet who was old when Yeshua was born, and it was revealed to her by the Holy Spirit that she would not taste death until she had seen Yah's Messiah. So what does that tell us? All of these examples from the Scriptures where it is being revealed, but what's the timing? It's happening right then. When it's happening around you, it's happening right then. So here's the big question. and this is something we're going to have to wrestle with. What would you say? Do you have any scriptural evidence for this, or just your thoughts? Does Yah reveal well in advance to you, to someone else in the Bible? Do you ever see that? Where it is revealed well in advance so that you can like prepare or do something? Where's that at? I'm not saying it doesn't exist, and I'm not saying it does. I'm saying, does anyone know? Jerry?
It's Grace.
Go ahead, Gracie.
I put that up to say that before you said where. My first reaction is, I think that sometimes we could get awfully overloaded if he told us too much too soon.
True.
And so he gives it to us as in a need to know situation. When we need to know it, it's there. If we needed to be planning for it more clearly before it got there, from here to here, from there to here, then he would explain it as much as we need to know it.
Yeah, that's an excellent. Yeah, that's an excellent insight. Hold on just a second, Jerry. Hayden, you got a microphone?
I was just going to say.
You were going to say what? Noah. There you go. Okay.
Right.
Now you might say that was done well in advance, and it certainly was. Why was it done well in advance?
Because he had something to do.
Because he had something to do. That's the important part. And here's the key. It was going to take a long time to do. He was a very long-lived man. I mean, the dude lived to like 900 or something, right? I mean, Noah lasted a long time. But also, he was building a ginormous ark with seemingly just his 3 sons. Now, that's a big job. And it says, if I remember correctly, the text says, how long did that take to build? 100 years? That's a long time. So in that situation, it was revealed to Noah in advance because he needed that time to do that. Okay, that's a great example. Jerry, did you want to throw something else in there?
Yeah, you're on.
You just turned yourself off, Jerry.
Turn my microphone off.
There you go.
Okay, I heard somebody say years and years ago that God will only give you as much information as you will obey. That you will, in other words, God told me that I should be observing the Sabbath. I've read that a million times. You go into a legal place, it's all over everybody's wall, and we just ignore it because nobody obeys it.
Yeah.
Why should God give us any more information if we're not going to do what he tells us to do in the first place?
That's a great insight, Jerry, and I couldn't agree more. Angela?
This reminds me of when Israel, when he took them the long way to the land, because if they saw war, it might be a way of preventing fear that human nature can't overcome, because he took them isn't that what happened? He took them the long route so that they wouldn't be afraid or something. So maybe he's trying to protect our own, protect our sanity.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good insight. That's a good insight. You do need to protect your peace, and having, I mean, you can see what happened to Daniel when I read that section from Daniel. Whatever he saw made him sick for weeks. But I would point out one thing before I go to Jacqueline. What did he do once he got over being shocked and dismayed and sick? What does it say?
He went about his business.
He went about the king's business. He went back to work. He said, ain't nothing I can do about it. It's not for me at this particular time. It is really disturbing. It really troubled him, but he could do nothing. And so he just seemingly went back to work. I got stuff to do. I got a job to do here. I can't weigh myself down with that. I got to move forward. Good insight, Angela. Jacqueline?
Yeah, I was going to say Abraham being told about that his people would go into slavery and then be out for 400 years. The entire Exodus is a prophecy in advance for us, thousands of years later. There's thing after thing after thing. And then in modern times, like one story that came immediately to mind is, I don't know if you guys have ever heard about this, but over in Eastern Europe, and I'm trying to remember where it was, but there was this boy who in the 1800s had this vision about these people coming and destroying their town, and he got an exact vision of how they needed to escape their town. Like he told them place by place by place by place how to do that. It was like in the 1840s or whatever. And anyways, in the 1940s, this thing came to pass, but only one family remembered the vision and followed through on the things that he said. And that was the only family that escaped the town. Everyone else was decimated.
Wow.
As the Nazis came in.
That's crazy.
And there's just other things that are like that. I personally have had this happen in my own life where it's so weird to me that, like, I remember one time when I was in college and I ended up doing campus ministry in college, and I did a prayer ministry, and it was a very interesting ministry. But somehow I got a hold of a paper that I wrote in third grade, and in third grade I described exactly what I was going to be doing in my mid-20s. And I was like, how would I have, there's just no way. But it was so confirming to me that I had gotten this, insight in third grade to write this thing down, that it was this exact description of what I did later on.
Must have been given to you for a reason.
Yeah.
No, that's fascinating. So, these overall insights into prophecy and, how to relate to it, I have a feeling, obviously, as we continue to go through the book of Zechariah, that we're going to probably need to revisit these conversations about what does this mean and what are we supposed to do with it and how does prophecy relate to us. So we're just going to probably have to continue to repeat these ideas to ourselves and just remind ourselves, what's the point here? What are we doing with this information? So those are all excellent insights. And I think, looking at these particular elements, okay, for example, when he says he sees this, he behold at night and a man riding on a red horse. Let's just start right there, okay? Let's start with the first thing, the horses, okay? I would say that we have, these are those whom Yah has sent to patrol the earth, okay? We got a man and a red horse, a man riding on a red horse. Any comments, questions, or concerns about who this man is? I only ask because I'm sure you've probably heard or you've thought about it yourself. Many people suggest that this man on the red horse is Yeshua himself, a pre-incarnate Messiah. It's certainly a fascinating idea. It could be just a regular old messenger. It could be Metatron. Who knows, man? I don't really think that. Does it matter who it is? No. Not really. That's probably why God didn't tell us who it was. Nevertheless, I think, and I'm going to state the obvious, I will absolutely just go ahead and state the obvious. There are no horses. There are no riders. There's not a myrtle tree. There's not a ravine that the myrtle trees are in. What is happening is that Yah is opening the curtain so that you can see into the spiritual realm. And you need something to help you grasp the meaning, okay? When you think of horses and riders going out and patrolling, going to and fro, whatever it is, what does that make you think of? What is it going to make Zechariah think of so that he can have some context from his own world to understand what Yah is showing him that is happening in the spiritual world. Jerry?
It makes me think of the cavalry in the military.
Yes, yes.
Back in the old days, they used to ride horses a lot more than they do today.
Yeah. No, that's I think you're exactly right, Jerry, and I think that that's precisely what Zechariah would have thought of, is either a military leader sends out riders, a reconnaissance mission. They could be the king sends messengers out to the farthest reaches of his dominion in order to gather information or to disseminate orders for regional governors. I think pretty clearly that Zechariah is understanding this to be the context that he'll pick up is this is the king sending out his people to do whatever the king wants done. Angela?
When we were on vacation, we were staying at a place and it had pictures of horses with cowboys on them doing, roping, and there was all this movement. And I was thinking that the horse and rider, and how in all these pictures, and if you watch Westerns, the horse and the cowboy on him, the horse and the rider, they're working together in tandem. And that maybe here you have a force, like Jerry said, represented. It's a force, and it's a force that's characterized by power and movement, because they're moving over the earth, and an intellect. And that's why you have the rider on the horse, and all of these are working in tandem. It's almost like this is an aspect of Yah that patrols, informs, communicates, kind of thing. Not even that it has to be a separate entity,
Right.
but just him trying to communicate that here's the aspect of me that's watching over.
Well, and Tracy mentioned that a second ago when she was talking about the eyes of Yah, to roam to and fro across the earth. He is perceiving. This could be an not an anthropomorphic, but an attaching of something physical to a non-physical thing like Yah.
Well, he's trying
things.
to communicate something spiritual using something that
You
this
can latch
person
onto.
in this temporal world can try to understand,
Right.
try to just get some kind of clue.
Right, absolutely. Tracy?
So when you said that it's hypothesized that this man could be Messiah, I hadn't thought about that before, so that got my wheels turning. So he's on a red horse, red Adam, which is rooted in blood, Dam, the Hebrew word for blood. And we know that Messiah is coming with a robe dipped in blood, and he's coming to make war. And that reminded me of what he said in Matthew 10:34, think not that I come to send peace on the earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. And again, this red horse seems to be taking peace away, because you look at verse 15, he's seeing these nations sitting at peace, but he's angry with a great anger at the nations at ease. So I think there's something here with that, like the peace taking away, and I could see that it could be a representation of Messiah.
Yeah, sure. Did someone else have their hand up? I don't remember. Yes, Jacqueline, go ahead.
So thinking about the fact that there's a red horse and a sorrel horse, and I don't know if you guys know much about horses, but a sorrel horse is a red horse.
Right.
And so it's like, why is a red horse and a red horse?
Right.
But hearing what Tracy's saying, I wonder if the red horse, the Adam, represents man, and then the sorrel represents the red.
Yeah, that's interesting. I puzzled over that just like you did, Jacqueline. You probably know more about horses than I do, but I thought to myself, well, isn't sorrel red? And I thought, well, okay, so I started looking a little bit deeper, and I think, and here's me, real surface level. You go, okay, wait, maybe the red horse is like really red, like a chestnut red, and the sorrel horse is like a brownish red. I got caught up in the actual colors, but I see where you're headed with that, and I think that's good and keen insight. So, what do these things represent? I mean, could it be Yeshua? Yeah, it certainly could. And, but I think the key thing here is that there are no horses. It's just, this is us getting a peek behind the scenes into the spiritual realm where all this stuff is happening invisibly. There are spirits going and doing these things, angels that he is sending to do his. Does he need them to do that? Does he need somebody to come back and report to him what is happening? No. So why would he do that? Well, perhaps, there's a question here from the angel in a little bit in verse 12 where he says, "Oh, Lord of hosts, how long will you have no compassion?" Is he asking that question because he genuinely wants to know? I mean, is this teaching us that angels are not omniscient? They don't know everything. Is the angel curious? Or is he asking that question because he thinks that Zechariah probably has that question too? And he's just preempting that question. But are these spiritual forces at all? Or are they just the movement of Yah that is doing his work? His eyes are roaming. Notice that it says that these are those whom Yah has sent to patrol the earth. Now that lets you know about power and dominion and his kingdom, okay? Because a king, even the great Persian Empire, is only ruling a tiny fraction of the whole earth. But these three riders are patrolling the entire earth. That speaks to the majesty and the power over the whole earth that these riders, if you want to call them that, have. Their purview, their dominion is the entire earth. Now, thinking from the perspective of the person who's hearing this is Zechariah, and he's going to tell the people in his day what this is. How is that information going to affect him? The fact that Yah himself, or literally sending out his minions to patrol and cover the whole earth to come back with a report, and the report that they give, how might that impact you? Just hearing that, Jerry?
I was thinking in the book of Revelation, you've got three angels that are going to preach that are going to be flying around the world, and they're going to be preach the everlasting gospel. And I believe when that is done, they go back to God and report. The word is out, and then God says, "Son, go get them."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good insight, Jerry. And it made me think as you were saying that. Does Yah need the help of angels? No. Does he need your help? No. Does he want your help? Does he want you to get involved in what he's doing? Does he love people to see his vision for how things are working and how they should work and getting people on board? Yes, he loves having helpers and people who are on board with what he's doing, whether it's human or angelic. And so does he need these people to do that if there are indeed angels running around doing that? No, he doesn't need them, but he's happy to have them for their own sakes. It says in 1 Peter, somebody else mentioned this too, that angels long to look into these things. These are fascinating and powerful things that our Father is doing, and they love to look into it and see what's happening. So he's like, yeah, get on your horse and go and see what I'm doing. So, perhaps. But these ideas are so much more than a man can grasp. And so these ideas signify, what Yah is doing in his dominion. And they're, out there patrolling, going up and down on the earth to discern what is happening. And then you got to get to this whole idea of the earth is all sitting and quiet. But he seems to be upset about that. So we're going to need to dig in a little bit below the surface on that one. Jacqueline?
Just one more thing with this. I may be about to stick my foot in my mouth. I don't know. But thinking about that, the things that are happening are not only happening for the sake of man, that we were brought into this earth as a witness to the spiritual realm as well, as a witness to the angelic creation, being that all of the different angelic creations. And so, some of these things may be happening for the sake of the angelic creations. Like you had just said, maybe they're going out so that they can see what's happening.
Yeah.
And two, like the question that you talked about, the angel asking about how long will you have no compassion on Israel? And the very next sentence is, and the Lord comforted him, comforted the angel. Like, why does the angel need comforting about what's happening in Jerusalem and Judea?
Yeah.
So I think that there is a stake that the angelic or heavenly forces have in what mankind is doing.
Yeah.
And our response and how we're going to interact with God is going to impact the heavenly realm.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like God is using us as an example of what mercy, grace, and judgment looks like.
Yeah.
So that when he judges the angels and that, because it says we're going to actually judge the angels.
That's right.
That they will understand that that is coming out of a place of justice and mercy and grace, where if they didn't have us to view in this, then they wouldn't have that example. I don't know.
No, that's a fascinating insight. And I heard a teacher one time say the most amazing thing, and it tripped me out, but I thought it stuck with me. He said, the world that you're living in is not the real world. That's the real world. What you're living in is just a shadow of the real world. And I'm like, that's a fascinating insight. Angela?
Well, and then I heard a teacher say something about the restoration of heaven and earth. And I think so oftentimes we think that the earth is the only place with a problem. But clearly, when you have angels that have rebelled, there's a problem in another realm.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like Jacqueline said, there are things going on beyond this planet or this whatever dimension. Yeah, that there's restoration that needs to happen in another dimension. It was at least one other as well.
Yeah, that's an awesome insight. Was someone else going to say anything? Jerry, go, buddy.
Yeah, I was thinking when those three angels are flying around, it's preaching the everlasting gospel. You got 144,000 Jewish people, 12,000 for each tribe. It's like 12,000 little Pauls out there just preaching all over the world.
Yeah.
Evangelizing the world. That's my understanding of their role.
Yeah, absolutely. Good insight. So, when you look at, for example, if we let's break this text down just a little bit and see how far we can get here. Notice that these men and horses are standing among myrtle trees. Now, you notice that in the Septuagint and in the concordant literal version of this same passage, it doesn't say myrtle trees. It says standing between the shady mountains. This is a fascinating twist. Most translations do say standing among the myrtle trees which were in the ravine or a hollow, a shady place, a depression of some kind. But the Septuagint and a couple of other translations says standing between the shaded mountains. That's a fascinating thing, and I don't know exactly what to do with that. I searched high and low through the Hebrew of that passage, and I could not quite. I think it's well, that myrtle trees are Hadassah? Hasadim. Hasadim, which is basically the plural form of Hadassah, who was Queen Esther. A myrtle is Hadassah, or no, Hadass. It's Hadass. I think so.
I think Hadass, yeah.
I'd have to look at it a little bit deeper. But they're in a ravine or a depression of some kind. I'm just going to go with that translation because I couldn't figure out why they're. I thought maybe the Har, because Har is mountain. I wonder if maybe there was, who knows how they got that translation. But it occurred to me, what does this myrtle tree, we can look at it from both perspectives. Does the myrtle tree represent something? Does the hollow or the ravine represent something? If it is to be translated as shaded mountains, does that represent something? What are your thoughts, Tracy?
Not sure about the the ravine, because the ravine is probably the word that the Septuagint is translating as that shady place, because it seems to correlate. But the myrtle is interesting because the first mention is about in Nehemiah 8:15 in regards to Sukkot, which is a very joyous and peaceful time. It's to celebrate this coming peace.
Right.
And then in Isaiah 55, it's mentioned again. Yahweh's talking about how his word is going to go forth and do what he sent it to do. And he says that, then he says, you shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth. So he's talking about peace again and this coming joy. And then he says, instead of the thorn shall come up the fir tree, and instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle tree. So I think myrtle tree is again being related to a peace, some kind of peaceful time. Not sure exactly about Esther, because that is her original name, and it could be some kind of indication of peace that she would help bring in to the Jews at that time.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good insight. Some of the Jewish commentators and even the Christian commentators that I read about this section here indicated that the myrtle trees were a mystical representation of the nation of Israel itself, because a myrtle tree is a very beautiful ornamental evergreen type of tree. And the fact that this beautiful tree doesn't grow in ravines and at the bottom of hollows, that this signified that the nation of Israel is in a very low state and is at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, and that these angelic messengers are congregating among the myrtle trees that are in this depressed place, and that was somehow symbolic, and that perhaps the reader would have understood that a beautiful myrtle tree is like the Lord's planting. And you know what I'm saying? And we've heard different things like that in the scripture before, where Israel is connected with a fig tree or something like that. So I thought that was an interesting idea, that the myrtle tree represents Israel in the ravine being a really depressed and bad situation, but that the angels of Yah are among those trees and are moving around and are doing their work. It was an interesting idea. Ella?
Yeah, just going off of what you just said, like if you look up myrtle trees online, they're like really beautiful trees. They're like very colorful and bright, and you look at them and you're just like, oh, that's life right there. But it's kind of weird that, yeah, it's in like this shady, dark place.
Yeah.
In the ravine or behind the mountain or whatever it was.
Yeah, absolutely. That ravine word does seem to have some strong negative, bad connotations. And you're right. Seeing a beautiful tree in this really kind of nasty place, it's almost like a swamp. It's like that. Trees don't grow like that. Don't grow there.
When we were on vacation, though, we stayed at a place that had a creek behind it, and there were pine trees all around, but right down in the creek, and it was like a ravine, and we were joking around about it being like this Zechariah vision, but down there you had leafier trees because of the water. And so like a tree planted by a stream of water, the stream of water is going to be in the ravine, which, yes, is a low place.
True. That's true. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. And to think about ravines in a desert area, I mean, Israel's a lot of desert. A ravine would be a place of shade, and shade isn't necessarily bad there. It's a place of refuge from the sun. So you have a tree and a place of refuge, where you can get out of the sun and you can have a place of rest, peace. Right. So it may be that it's a representation of peace. Yeah. And a lot of times trees represent leaders or nations.
Yep.
So it's, nations at rest in a place of rest, and they're going out and talking about it being a place of peace.
Yeah. And
so it could just be a multiple witness of the exact same concept over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Brett.
Yeah, I think what she just said was kind of like First Thessalonians, where you have two different types of peace. You've got those who are saying peace and safety, and then as sudden destruction comes upon them, and then there's the peace that Yah gives those who should encourage one another, because we understand the message is repeated over and over, and First Corinthians and Exodus, everything, it's the same message, different time, different spin, different flavor.
Yeah.
And we understand.
Yeah, no, that's excellent insight. Ella?
Let's see. So Angie's verbiage reminded me, I don't know if she said it intentionally or not, but it reminded me of Psalms 1 verse 3 that says, "For he shall be as a tree planted by the rivers of water that yields its fruit in its season."
Yeah.
And whose leaf does not wither, and whatever he does prospers.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Great insight, you guys. Who is it? It's Mike. Where's Mike?
Oh, I was looking rough. I could put my camera on.
It's not possible that Mike looks rough.
I was just kind of wondering, based on some of the things you had pointed out this evening around, the horns, and even that word horn is sometimes like a peak of a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And this ravine, you said, is like between two mountains, or the shadow of a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And if these mountains are kind of what scattered his people, is the tree a representation of his people, and they're kind of in the shadow of these oppressors of Babylon getting ready to come out to build the temple?
Yeah. That's a great.
I don't know.
That's a good insight, Mike. I like that. That is if you do interpret it as mountains in the shadow cleft of a mountain or something, and this is a beautiful myrtle tree that is surrounded by big mountains, the horns. I think that's a great. I think that both of those metaphors that you suggested, is the mountains and horns represent powers. Then yes, that does make good sense that you have this little beautiful tree surrounded by, in a dark, lonely place, surrounded by big mountains and horns of power, and I think that it does suggest some type of comfort, that the angels of Yah, or perhaps Yah himself, is moving among that myrtle tree. You can see, when you look at Nehemiah and Ezra and these two prophets who were prophesying during that same period of time, that the Spirit of Yah is moving powerfully in these people. And he is, this is a very fruitful time. Although they are not doing everything right, they've got some stumbling blocks. They're trying to rebuild his temple and fight off their enemies too. Very interesting things are happening. They are oppressed and perhaps depressed, but he is telling them, be patient. I am among you. Hang in there. I'm watching out for you. We're going to move forward in this thing. So I think that's a great insight.
And that's what he says next is, sorry, that like the mission statement is, my house will be built in it and a measuring line will be stretched over it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm going to assess all this. And like Tracy was saying with the horse, is it peace or is it not?
Right.
And then when he stretches that line over Jerusalem, it's almost like it's assessment time.
Yep.
And my house will be built in it.
Yep. Absolutely. Good insight. Now I'll move forward just briefly to this phrase in verse 11 where it says all the earth is peaceful and quiet. This is the gist of the message that these messengers, these horses and riders, are bringing back to say, we've patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth is peaceful and quiet. Now, peaceful and quiet is not exactly a word for word, real correct translation of that. Quiet is shakat, meaning at rest, and the other word, peaceful, is literally just sitting. That's the Hebrew word for sitting. So if you look at some of the alternate definitions of the word shakat, meaning at rest, you look at like Joshua 11 and 23, for example. I'm not going to pull that scripture up for you, but you can make a note to yourself if you like. That's the first time that that word appears, where it says that Joshua gave the Israelites great victory over their enemies, and the land enjoyed its rest and peace. There's that idea of peace again. But there's also an idea that these nations are sleeping or idly complacent. There is a hint there of this is not peace and quiet. This is idly complacent. That is one of the interpretations of the word for, it was either peace or quiet. I don't remember which one it was. You'd have to dig into that a little bit for me. But one of those words has the connotation of idle complacency. Idle complacency is not a good thing. It's not peace and quiet. It's self-congratulatory, I'm doing fine. I have nothing to worry about. Nothing bad will happen to me.
That's like Brett said.
That's exactly like Brett said. When they're saying peace and safety, sudden destruction comes upon them. And so I think that perhaps these guys are perhaps sitting around enjoying what they think is their, well, you know, here's the thing. Remember back to your story of Daniel, right? Daniel is alive when what significant event happens in Babylon? Bible trivia. Daniel is alive from quite a ways. That dude lived apparently a pretty long life. What is one of the last stories that you have in the book of Daniel where there is something significant happens in his own life? Not a prophetic vision or something, but what happens? Jerry, do you know?
I think that might have been when he was thrown into the lion's den.
Not quite. That was under Nebuchadnezzar.
The Persians take over?
Okay.
Do you remember who is the last king that he served? Belteshazzar. And what happened to Belteshazzar?
He lost it.
He lost the whole kingdom. The Babylonians were overthrown by the Persians in the life of Daniel. So,
yeah, that's right.
In this story that we're reading right here, the Persians are already in control. Now they're sitting complacently idle, thinking, if you read the history, you can see that this king, Darius, had defeated 9 enemies. It's boasted in clay tablets that he had defeated 9 enemies and his kingdom is at peace. Now, how long is it before? Who takes over next? Greece. Alexander of Macedon is coming right up. Okay, so they're not going to enjoy peace for very long. Are they idly complacent? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And their peace is not going to last very long. Now, why does he bring this up? Well, I think that this is, again, to comfort and encourage the exiles. Because they have to be thinking, maybe they looked at this passage or heard what the angel said and thought, well, the whole earth is at peace and at rest. Well, look at us. We're not at peace and at rest. You know, this doesn't seem righteous and fair. This doesn't seem good at all. But Yah is saying, no, you misunderstood me. They're complacently idle and their destruction is coming. And then he even elaborates and says, the Lord was a little angry, but and we'll discuss that in just a moment, but I want to give a moment to Brett. Go ahead, Brett.
Moses.
I was going to say, isn't that kind of Israel's problem that they get comfortable? They love those cucumbers. Get comfortable in Babylon. They set their heart, their houses.
And they get to sit outside.
Not ready to pick up and move when they're called to pick up and move.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You know, I can see how they would get that mixed idea. And, you know, we talked about this at the beginning of the study where, there's like 50,000 people are the only ones who actually went back to the land. It was going to be tough for sure. but they also probably contrasted that with the message from Yah it was given to Jeremiah that says, go to Babylon. Go there and stay there and work hard and make a life there. Now, how do they know when the time is? Because we don't have any records from Babylon, some prophet saying, let's all go. The only guys we have are Nehemiah and Ezra, who just went. And the guy that they're coming along late. There were already a bunch of people there. Now, some did come back with Nehemiah, but we don't have a record from inside Babylon where there's some prophet saying, hey guys, let's all leave Babylon and go back to the Holy Land. What's that, Angela?
What about the decree?
Well, Cyrus did make a decree that they could go back.
Is that the signal?
Is that the signal? That could be. That could be the signal. But is there something uttered by the prophet, by a prophet, any prophet, that would give you a hint, a heads up, that you're supposed to be looking for some type of a decree? Now, you might interpret a certain passage in Daniel, but that'd be a hard decree to make, because I think that decree is specific to the Messiah, and you could perhaps interpret it that way. I'd have to dig a little bit deeper into that. That might be something to look up, but it's a good insight. Was somebody else going to make a comment?
Jerry.
Jerry, were you going to say something? No? Okay.
No.
So these nations are idle and sleeping, whatever things. But, then this angel interjects and says, well, how long, Yah of hosts, will you have no compassion for Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, which you've been indignant with for these 70 years? And then it goes to the next thing where he is given comforting words. The question is, are these the comforting words, or is the angel? You almost get the idea that the angel is hearing these comforting words, and then he gives a summary or something. He says, "Thus says Yah, here, proclaim this." So it's almost like he's heard these comforting and encouraging words, and then he tells Zechariah, "Here, go and proclaim this." These aren't exactly the comforting words that I heard from our Father, but I'm going to give you a summary of it. I don't know, and it may not be that important. But the point is, what are the encouraging and comforting words? Well, I am exceedingly jealous for Jerusalem and Zion. I still love you. I am exceedingly jealous for you. And number two, while I was only a little angry, they furthered the disaster. He is very angry with the nations who were at ease. For while I was only a little angry, now I am really angry. Who is the anger directed at?
The nations?
The nations, yeah. He says, I was only a little angry, and they furthered the disaster. What do you think that means? Why was he angry with them, and how did they further the disaster? Some people have suggested that Yah had in his mind that he is going to use foreign nations to punish his people. And he certainly has a history of doing that, and he actually told them he would do that very same thing. The problem is, if you interpret it that way, then that literally means that Yah's instrument got out of control. I want you to punish my people, but you went too far. Well, that kind of makes Yah seem like he's at the mercy of these foreign powers, and he couldn't stop them from overly correcting his people. I don't like the sound of that. Do you? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they went too far and punished Israel too much, and humiliated them too much. But it seems to me that Yah wouldn't allow that to happen. He would allow the precise amount of punishment that they needed.
Well, maybe that's what he's saying.
That is possible. You know what occurred to me as I was reading this, and I actually put two things that I want to share with you. Two little passages here. One of them is from Isaiah 57 and 14. This kind of connected it for me. Yah says, build it, clear a way, remove all the obstacles out of the way of my people. For this is what the high and exalted one says, the one who rules forever, whose name is holy. I dwell in an exalted and holy place, but also with the discouraged and humiliated, in order to cheer up the humiliated and to encourage the discouraged. For I will not be hostile forever or perpetually angry, for then man's spirit would grow faint before me, the life-giving breath I created. I was angry because of their sinful greed. I attacked them and angrily rejected them, yet they remained disobedient and stubborn. I have seen their behavior, but I will heal them. I will lead them, and I will provide comfort to them and those who mourn with them. That comfort word is the same one that is used in that passage, comfort, speaking comforting words. Now, this is more of that encouragement, but here's the second part, the second passage that I would play for you. And this is from Proverbs 24 and 17. It says, do not exult when your enemy falls, and let not your heart rejoice when he stumbles, lest Yah see it, and it be evil in his eyes, and he turn away his wrath from him, and I interjected, and toward you. That is perhaps what we're seeing here. And I remember, I did not search this up, and I should have searched a little bit deeper, but there's a passage in one of the prophets about Edom rejoicing over Israel. And Yah was very angry because when they were watching, that's like your brother's getting a spanking and you know the other one's going, aha. Well, now you're in trouble too, because you do not rejoice over the spanking of your sibling. So it occurred to me that perhaps this is what is happening here, is that these nations were given leave to punish Israel, but they took it too far in that they rejoiced in the act of correction. They exulted in the act of, humiliating their enemies. They took it too far in their attitude. That's the way that I looked at this passage and perhaps saw that this might be what is being talked about here. I think I'm going to stop here because I know it's getting late for some of you on the East Coast. And I want to just say, we got this promise of, I'm just going to go back to this little passage here, and we'll deal with this a little bit more in the next section, where he's talking about, I will return to Jerusalem with compassion, and my house will be built in it, and my cities are going to be overflowing. Now, unfortunately, I'm having a hard time saying that this is going to happen. This is not going to happen until the kingdom is set up. Now, can you say, well, a miniature of that happened? They're rebuilding the temple right now in the story. Yes, that is true. But are these cities overflowing with prosperity? Not really, no. It's kind of limited. It's very limited. You could look at it as a small prophetic shadow picture of what greater revelation of the glory of Jerusalem that's coming, but I don't think that it's right to suggest that what is happening in their time is a fulfillment of this prophecy. And I think you probably wouldn't be surprised to hear me say that, because this is often what happens with prophecy is you see that it is an upward spiral, and it gets bigger and more fulfilled each time. That prophecy keeps getting fulfilled over and over and over, and it gets bigger and more all-encompassing each time it is fulfilled. So this is like a miniature fulfillment. These people struggling to build this temple back up. But but the words that Yah is speaking here are to be more completely fulfilled in the time of the kingdom and the Messiah. And I think, and I would leave you with this idea. Yah in these verses right here, verses 16 through 17, is giving them the picture on the front of the puzzle box. Because now all of the visions that Zechariah is going to see, the remainder of these visions in the night, are going to be the puzzle pieces that will show you how it's going to unfold and develop. I think what we're seeing here is a description of the finished product. This is what it's going to look like when it's done. You're looking at the front of the puzzle box with those two verses. And then when Zechariah begins to unfold all of these things in the following chapters, those are the puzzle pieces. And I would suggest to you that you take a look at each of these images, because I believe, and some of you will be delighted with this, that there is a chiastic structure in the prophecies of Zechariah. That if you break them open and you put them you can put them into a chiastic structure. And what's right in the center of the chiastic structure? What would you guess?
Yeah, the high priest.
Joshua the high priest being cleansed. Take a look at that, and we'll deal with that a little bit later. But here we have the puzzle box, and we will look more deeply at this the next time we get together.